I think a discussion around busing, or many discussions around busing, are appropriate. The legacy of busing are appropriate. And it seems to me that there's still some airing out to be done from people who were around during that period, and for people who were not around during that period but are living with the aftermath, if you will. I thought that at the time I was a big supporter of busing. I've come to change my mind. I think it was an ill-conceived way to try and get at, or its intent, its initial intent, it was born out of an intent to get at de facto desegregation in the Boston public schools. So it became about race in neighborhoods and not about education. We lost, in my opinion, we lost 1 or 2 generations of Boston students in the busing crisis. Kids who just did not get educated. You know, I think about my days at Rosendale High School, and I spent some time at South Boston High School, but as you walked through the corridor, it was a war zone. It was literally like a war zone. So, and you had kids in there who were agitating the cops. You had cops who were agitating the kids. You had kids who were agitating each other based on what neighborhood they came from, right? And that was the day. There was no learning going on. You had teachers who were trying to referee and mediate. You also had some teachers who were obstructionists because they didn't believe in busing, right? So it was just, to me, a lost generation. And the time that I spent in the school really was in breaking up fights, trying to counsel young people on how to handle different situations, trying to keep the cops from arresting kids who I thought shouldn't have been arrested. I mean, so, you know, the conversation now is, how do we make such a big, big mistake? To me, one of the biggest ills of busing, when I think about all the resources and money we spent on them damn buses, that could have been put into the classrooms. It's a travesty to me. I mean, I think that busing contract today is like $20 million a year. It's a lot of money that could be going to educate kids in the right way. So hopefully I like what the mayor's doing. I mean, I think the mayor's taken a strong position on how this city moves forward. I think he's got some other challenges that are similar to the challenges that we had in the 70s, because again, neighborhoods, ethnicity, and the other part was class. Yeah. Okay, we got an issue, we got a severe class issue coming to bear in this city as you look at the way this city is being gentrified. And it's going to impact where kids go to school, who are the kids in the school system, how they get educated. So I think if we sort of take a look at all the things that happened in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s and early 2000s, I mean, one of the things that we should be about, and those of us in education sort of push and preach it, learning from history, learning from the past so that we don't repeat the same mistakes.
If you tell me your zip code, I will tell you how you will do on MCAS, in SATs, and LSATs, and how you do on the bar exam if you're a lawyer. Just tell me your zip code. Because economics is the driver of achievement when you're using standardized testing. And one of the things that we just did in Massachusetts, we spent $100 million creating a new test called PARC. And what we found out after we spent all that money, it has no more predictive ability of success in career or college than the MCAS. So the idea that you can predict from a standardized test. And the last thing I will say is we know how to close the achievement gap, and we do not do it. And it's not by testing kids more. And I'll tell you the 3 things you can do to close the achievement gap. High quality early childhood, which Massachusetts is way behind in. Second is make sure kids are not hungry when they come to CLU. So breakfast in the classroom, all kids who need it. Third, and probably most important, summer learning. So summer learning loss is the number one factor in the achievement gap, because poor kids lose 2 to 3 months every summer. Middle-class kids either stay the same or gain. And so if you're cumulative, by the time you're 6th or 7th grade, you're 2 years behind. So there's lots of things we can do, and I agree it's class. Race is absolutely a factor, there's no question about it. But class and poverty are determinants
Sure.
of how you're going to do and how you're going to achieve. And the sad part about it is we know what to do about it.
.311 systems. Everyone know what 311 is? Mm-hmm. No? I saw some head shake. So 311 is usually the number that cities designate to reach out to city services, to the mayor's office, to make complaints about things, to request services, to connect with all the different city departments. It is usually a pretty amazing system in terms of transparency and accountability, at least for the city of Boston. You can go to a website, you could see all of the complaints that have been called in, what their status is, the map of them, all that stuff. It's pretty impressive. And so for folks who have been connected to government and have the privilege to go to community meetings and all those things, you become aware of these systems. The challenge with 311 systems is that they're inherently inequitable. There's access challenges, right? So if you don't speak English, there's services, but you begin the conversation in English, and so now the person has to figure out how to get you what you need, and by the end of it, you're like very exhausted and annoyed. If you don't speak English, if you're a person with a disability, if you're a person in a community of color that has had a history of experiences with government that have not bore any positive results for you in a meaningful ways, in the ways that you want them to, the likelihood that you're going to trust systems in a way that you would call that number is just unlikely. Immigrants, refugees, keep going, right? And so it's actually alienating a lot of people, and when you look at the map of who calls, it's communities who are already have a lot of resources.
When Tia talks about us taking the journey together, I think about the conversations today, and the conversations on race are not the same. Mm-hmm. I have one conversation on race, white folk have a different conversation on race. I think about my heritage because I think racism is institutionalized, and it was embedded into the psyche of this country many, many years ago, and it started with slavery. And so I think about my heritage as a descendant of slaves. What can I find that I can be proud of? Because I can't deny that part of my history, nor do I want to. So I'm very proud that my people were able to survive the atrocities of slavery. It took strong people. It took an unbelievable constitution to get through that. I'm extremely proud to know that this country would not have the wealth that it has today if it was not for the slaves. Yeah. This country was built on the back of free labor, slavery, right? Yeah. Those were my people who did that. Yeah. Okay, so as atrocious as it was, when I think about it in those terms, it allows me to talk about it without shame, with pride. Those are the kinds of conversations we have to be able to have.